There's this abstract about the profundity of music that is very, very interesting. One that lives here cannot not be impacted by it. And so it lives like a grand, almost philosophic question. My name is James Michalopoulos. I'm a painter, and I live in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I've been here forever. I had no engagement with the arts at all until basically after college. I would figure to be an economist, or I don't know, maybe I might have headed into engineering or chemistry, something like that. After college that I got into it, and sort of as a hobby. I was taking a break, I was on a vacation, and I was really bored. And I had a sketch pad, and I started to sketch, and it was kind of fun. Actually, once I became interested, I started to take it on like an earnest study. You know, I used to work on the street. I would go out on my Vespa that I had an easel attached to, and I would bring enough food, some wine, radio, lights, and I'd set up. So I'd find a situation, most of the time or often I was up in either the Ninth Ward, or I was up in uptown in the Irish Channel, somewhere where I found a street light on a house, and you know, there was a streetscape. So I'd sit up, and then I put my music on. And so I would spend my whole night with WWOZ and working on my piece. I'd usually show up around 9 o'clock at night, and I'd finish around 3 in the morning, you know, and go home, come back the next day if I needed to. But that was my routine, because it was so damn hot in the day that, you know, it worked out better for me at night, and it was a great routine. I ran that for, you know, a few years. You know, I kind of bought this whole idea that plein air was the only way to go. It's something that had a real school here in New Orleans. It was led by a guy named Henry Henchy. He was out of Providence, Rhode Island, and had a foot in New Orleans and a bunch of acolytes. Henchy's foundational thing was you need to be on the site and bring some kind of theory to the process. I ran into these guys, and they're so passionate. So for 15 years, I never painted anything from a photograph, ever. I would not. One day, I was walking through Jackson Square, and I saw a friend of mine named Joan Lizzie. So I see her working on this beautiful picture of a baby on the easel, and I thought, let me go over and say hello. So I walked over, and she's got a photograph the size of my thumbnail. It's like a passport photo of a baby, and she's made this beautiful thing of it. And I was like, oh my God, I'm over it. I will forget this Catholicism. I am now going to start working from whatever is available. Nothing's restricted anymore. Like, I don't have to actually funnel it through being there on the site. Any way I get there, it's what became available to me. There were periods of time where I only did landscapes, or I only did portraits. And then finally, at some point, I said, all right, I'm going to cut it off for a while and just work on architecture. And I took it on like a serious subject for me, like an exclusive serious subject, and it would have been somewhere in that period there. But I had done some before, but not like that focus. I started painting landscapes in France. It was during that period when I was doing a lot of art directing. I worked at the House of Blues for 6 or 7 years as art director there for their shows, and then got caught up in the thing, found myself in France and working over there a lot more. And so I ended up buying a little house in Burgundy, and I was surrounded by all this nature and nothing else. I didn't speak any French, nobody spoke any English, and there was nothing to go do and nowhere to go. And so I was like, oh my God, well, let's walk in the woods, you know, let's take a walk in the countryside. And I started to really get in touch with it in a way that I hadn't, you know. So it was this big contrast for me, living in New Orleans proper and then living in France in the countryside. Yeah, the Jazz Fest reached out to me and asked me if I would be interested in working on potentially interested in working on a poster for them. and they asked me what I thought of the different artists that they were talking about and which one that I would feel, most comfortable with and, like that. And I said, Mac Rebennack is where I'd like to go. I went and visited him in his apartment in Manhattan, and I think I shot him here once or twice also in town, but most of the work that I used for that I did in his home and studio not far from Grand Central Station in Manhattan. And I'm not a portrait painter typically, but there's a lot of like putting things together, that has to happen to make it all work, especially when you're kind of like telling a little bit of a story in the painting also. So like even though I photographed Mac in person, on several occasions, I put him in the street, in the painting, right? So, you're making some stuff up along the way there, and combining and doing one thing or another. So I'm like at service of the subject. Sometimes I want to bring a lot to that moment and direct it. Other times I want to just be there for it and let it take me. I don't want to, what the French call impose myself on a subject. I basically want to be in a dance with it. Like a musician should not play a nighttime melody in the same way that he plays a rocking dance tune. You've got to bring a different sensibility to it. It gives you an opportunity to give yourself up to something, right? So I do. I give myself up to that landscape, and some very interesting things, unknown, unforeseen, can come out of that. And so that's part of like my shtick and part of what I bring to that and why it seems so different. I was watching a video of Wolfman Washington and John Cleary. And I mean, the two of them, such masters of their craft, and how they were spirited away and spiriting, that song, and then riding on it all and feeling so free and liberated by it. And I thought, my God, it's exactly like what you're saying. It's a sort of almost a meditation, a beautiful thing that I find so inspiring, and I always have about music and musicians, that they, more than any group, I feel, even painters, are spirited. They're taken away, they're gone into what they're doing and take risks that in that expression that are so inspiring for everyone. There's an element of being guided and giving into it and following it, allowing it, not knowing, So the most important thing for me in this show, there's a couple of things that show up. One is like to look at music itself, and the sort of inspiration, background that it is in our life here. So there's this abstract about the profundity of music that is very, very interesting. One that lives here cannot not be impacted by it. And so it lives like a grand, almost philosophic question, and the opportunity to look at that in the abstract. So that motivates some of the work. Then when you back off of that and you get into the granular, something more day-to-day, it's talking about personalities and particular styles and moments, memories and feelings that are associated with particular artists. So I have a chance to talk about some of the artists that impacted me over the years, some of the artists that have been particularly impactful out there in the community, and an opportunity to spend time with them, look at their group, think about the music that they made. And for me, a great part of this whole thing is actually being able to go back and live with all that music. So I'm spending so much time back there and listening to things I haven't listened to in a long time in some cases. But it's been a wonderful tour. And it's a great opportunity to look at and talk about, portray some of the people who have such a big impact on our town. And many of them that we don't necessarily talk about on a day-to-day basis, but were so important for many of us during the time and during the day. So I'm like, yeah, it's great fun to go there.